Hey folks, Mark Levin here. Now, before we dive into today's episode, I want to talk about something truly valuable, protecting your financial future with gold. It's called diversification. Now, for that, I only trust Advantage Gold. They're the real deal with 5-star service and a sterling reputation. So give them a call today. Call Advantage Gold at 800-900-8000. Tell them Mark Levin sent you. Trust me, you'll thank yourself in the future. Now let's get to the show. Results may vary. Consult with your financial professional.
He's here. He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811, 877-381-3811. Two big stories, actually 3 or 4 tonight. But I want to deal with this trial, so-called, and I want to deal with Iran. But first, what I just posted, and I want to elaborate on this. Obviously, I wasn't in the Manhattan courthouse, but I was listening carefully to what lawyers who I trust from Fox were saying through texts and emails to the reporters who in turn were reading them on the air, as well as those who were watching in the courthouse and spoke directly in front of the courthouse. This judge is a disgusting fraud who has his foot on the defense lawyer's throat while he allows the prosecutor to ramble on in every direction, including, only now, about federal campaign finance laws and personal insinuations against Donald Trump, as well as suggestions that Cohen's actions can now be inferred onto Trump. That is unconstitutional, but he doesn't care. He doesn't care. And how could you tell, ladies and gentlemen? Because Robert De Niro, who is an unhinged madman head case, was there during the closing arguments making his Genghis Khan speech. And Biden, through reporters, has announced that he's going to give a formal presidential speech after this trial is over. Clearly a violation of campaign laws, number one. Number two, clearly trying to pretend he's presidential. And let me just remind you of this. To me, the Trump campaign has one major point to make. Joe Biden cannot fix what he broke. And Joe Biden will not fix what he broke. Whether it's inflation, whether it's the border, whether it's our relationship with Israel, whatever it is, Joe Biden broke it, and he won't fix it. That's why Biden has to go. But let me go on. So he prevents a federal campaign expert, one of the greatest in the country, from testifying, does the judge. This federal campaign issue didn't come in until closing arguments. It's not even in the bill of particulars on the indictments. So that's, there's so many violations of rules of evidence, of due process, the federal and state constitutions, and so forth. I can't even list them all. If the claim is he violated a federal campaign law, which law? What's the citation? There's none. And we have Stormy Daniels, who was used to embarrass Trump and spew her hate, nothing more. Michael Cohen, who lies whenever he opens his big mouth. He's the lead state witness. That's how preposterous this entire case is. And it is. Now, did you know the Access Hollywood tape was played today? For what? I'll tell you what in a minute. Tell you exactly what's going on here. None of this is relevant. It's all intended to create anger and hate against Trump by the jurors, which is an abomination. This character assassination under cover of a so-called justice system is pure Stalinism. One can only imagine what kind of jury instructions this guy's going to direct the jury to follow tomorrow. Meanwhile, to underscore the political nature of all this, as I said, there's Biden's campaign use of Robert De Niro, a foul-mouthed madman. And the White House, of course, as I said, they've announced that Biden's going to give a presidential address. Now, as a result of left-wing groups, well, first, let's remember this. This is a non-case. No crime, federal, state, or local. Just like the phony financial case. The state misdemeanor having to do with corporate reporting was not violated. The non-disclosure agreement was a legal expense and reported as a legal expense. The misdemeanor statute had already ran away, had already run anyway. As a result of left-wing groups filing a complaint with the FEC, claiming the non-disclosure agreement was an illegal federal campaign contribution, the FEC said it was not. As if that wasn't enough, the Southern District of New York, the U.S. Attorney's Office, took another look at the case. It dropped it. Indeed, it was Cohen who agreed to committing a list of federal crimes, including perjury. The former Manhattan DA looked at it, Vance, and he dropped it. Bragg originally blew it off, but one of Biden's henchmen was sent to New York to work on the non-fraud case and then moved to the non-crime criminal case. It was taken up. Then this preposterous theory was concocted. Well, the state misdemeanor statute can be revived if the NDA can be said to have covered up another crime. In this case, a federal campaign violation, which they hid throughout the trial. And their key witness, Cohen, of course. The DA has no jurisdiction over federal campaign matters. The FEC in Southern District of New York do have jurisdiction but refuse to bring charges. So there was no federal campaign violation. That's why the judge refused to allow Brad Smith, former chairman of the FEC and federal campaign law expert, to testify for the defense as an expert witness, who would have fired a fatal legal torpedo into the DA's case. As he said on 3 different occasions on Life, Liberty, and Levin, there was no federal election crime, which is precisely why the judge wouldn't let the jury hear from him. And, of course, there's a lot more. I'd be here all day. The so-called judge in this case, Juan Merchan, is what we used to call a hanging judge. That is, the trial process is nothing more than a formality. In the end, nothing can be said, no evidence can be presented, no witness can alter, and no injustice can prevent the preordained outcome demanded by the judge. At least that's the judge's intent and goal. Remember, at the crux of all this, this is the key. There has been no evidence that Trump violated federal election law, let alone did so with intent and for which there's no reasonable doubt. That's the test to revive the state law. The state law cannot be revived without proving this. They proved nothing. They didn't even raise it during the trial because they didn't want the defense to have an opportunity to shoot a hole through it. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? My hope is there's at least one juror with the smarts, the guts, and the conscience who cuts through this static, the collateral evidence, the judge's misconduct, and says no to Merchan, no to Bragg, no to the Biden regime, and no to this horrendous tyranny. Now, this judge was not chosen by a lottery. He was chosen by another Democrat, the top judge in that particular jurisdiction. He's not a permanent judge. He's an acting judge. But he was chosen for a reason. This prosecutor, Bragg, has 34 counts. And technically, if Trump were found guilty of all of them, he'd be spending about 120 years in prison. He piled on where there was no case. Every invoice he used, every document he could find, he created an indictable offense, an indictable offense, an indictable offense. And yet they hid the ball. As I said, the New York State statute had run the statute of limitations. In other words, it was dead. It is a misdemeanor statute for a corporation. If you put down an expense in one category versus another, but even there you need to intend to do so. Trump didn't put down anything. It was done by others. And a non-disclosure agreement is a contract, hence rationally a legal expense. But Mark, it's a business expense too. They're one and the same for the purposes of the corporation. That's the bottom line. If he put it down as a business expense, they would have said he should have put it down as a legal expense. The point is, it's all transparent. He put it down where? In a public filing. It's in a public filing. He didn't hide anything. Or even more to the point, the accountants didn't hide anything. And so I asked Judge Merchant, what federal statute are you talking about under the campaign law? Which one? Cite it. If you're charged with a crime, you have a right to know what the hell you're charged with. Which one? We don't know. Who gets to decide that? A state judge? No. A city prosecutor? No. A New York jury? No. None of them. The FEC? Yes. The U.S. Attorney's Office? Yes. They didn't charge. There's nothing here. This 6-week trial has been nothing but an in-kind contribution to the Biden campaign. That's it. By the Democrat Party in New York. It's an in-kind contribution, a freebie. They bring out all the trash on Trump, the Stormy Daniels, the Michael Cohen, the National Enquirer, all the allegations, all the character assassinations reported day in and day out, day in and day out. You have a Stalinist judge sitting there who's both dumb and corrupt. Gee, that's never happened before. Well, look at the Old South and the judges there. Look all over the world. You've got them all over. Kangaroo courts, star chambers. Certainly can happen in America. It's happening right now, right in front of our eyes. That's what's happening. And then, of course, in these fascist and Marxist or autocratic regimes, they have their press. So they have their Jake Tappers. They have their CNN and their MSNBC dutifully reporting just as they want. And that's what we have today. Joe Biden's in trouble. He's destroyed our economy. He's destroying our currency. He's destroyed citizenship in our border. He's destroyed our schools. He's destroying our industries. He says, I've done more for union. No, you've done more to unions than you have done for unions. He's destroyed energy independence. He's a one-man wrecking ball. He's an arsonist. That's what he is. In our country, in Israel, other countries, what does he have to point to? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. He's got 8 electric vehicle chargers in the whole country for $500 million, Mr. Producer. Or whatever the amount was. Maybe it was $1 billion, $2 billion. So what the prosecution, let me put it this way, what the Democrat Party's doing through Bragg and through Merchant is they are throwing everything against the wall. Anything that will convince a juror not to like Trump and to vote guilty. Anything. Whether it's the Stormy Daniels allegations, whether it's the Michael Cohen allegations, whether it's the National Enquirer guy, whether it's this, whether it's that, doesn't matter. And then we have 34 state statute violations, and now they bring up the all-important federal offense, and there's nobody there to challenge it because they bring it up in their closing argument, and they go last. The defense can't even challenge it. The judge won't even allow them to challenge the fact that it's raised. He keeps dropping the hammer on them over and over and over again. So, we have to hope there's at least one juror, maybe one of the lawyers. But if they're predisposed to Biden and to destroying Trump, well, then that's where we'll be. We've got a lot more to say. We'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
You know, folks, China, Russia, Iran, they're all on the move. Right here in the U.S., you've got inflation, you have open borders, and, of course, an election year. Oh, and we just crossed over $34 trillion in debt with no signs of slowing down. It's time to wake up, folks. There's a lot at risk, possibly even your retirement account. The time to protect yourself is before a crisis, not after. Advantage Gold, the gold and silver company I recommend to help Americans. Well, they'll help you prepare now for times just like these. Call them at 800-900-8000 today. Get their free 2024 gold and silver kit. Plus, tell them I sent you, and they'll give you a special Mark Levin discount worth up to $1,300 if you qualify. Call Advantage Gold today. Here's the number, 800-900-8000. Plus, see if you qualify to get your special discount worth up to $1,300 today, 800-900-8000. Performance may vary. Past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results. You should always consult your financial and tax professional. I cannot stress enough, we talk about tyranny in other countries. Tyrannical ideologies, tyrannical leaders, tyrannical countries. We are in the midst of tyranny right here. And it takes courageous people, almost heroic people, to stand up to this. Right now, we see the judge in Florida who's doing exactly that. Jack Smith walked into that court the way he did in Chutkan's court in D.C. and demands a gag order on Trump because of this, that, and the other. She says, you haven't presented any evidence at all that anybody's being threatened, that there's a threat of violence, that anybody's really in any way, facing any kind of retribution. And she tongue-lashed him, in effect, because he's used to getting his way with Chutkan, and that's what goes home with Bragg and Merchan. They're like tag-teaming Trump. Now, if you essentially own the judge, then you're facing what we call tyranny. This is a totalitarian mindset. And it is supported by the vast majority of the Democrat Party media, as you can imagine. That's why CNN has no ratings. That's why MSNBC is a joke. So she denied the request to bar Trump in Florida from making statements about law enforcement in Documents case. Because if he had his way, this is Judge Aileen Cannon, by the way. She agreed with Trump's lawyers that the special counsel should have not filed such a motion without meaningfully conferring with the defense, as the local rule requires, and also it lacked what we call substance. These prosecutors are used to getting in their way, except in one place in Florida. This first case, Bragg, it went first because it's the most outrageous, and they knew they would completely own the courtroom. I'll be right back. You know, folks, we've got an awful lot swirling around this country, both internally and externally. We've got wars going on in all parts of the world. We've got riots effectively going on in our colleges and universities. We have inflation through the roof. It's an election year to boot. All these problems are often huge tailwinds for gold, which is why gold is at all-time highs, looking like it's going to go higher. And when it comes to gold, I only trust my friends at Advantage Gold. They help Americans just like you protect your retirement accounts and help safeguard your wealth through diversification. So call them right now. 800-900-8000. Get their free 2024 gold and silver kit plus a special Mark Levin discount worth up to $1,300 if you qualify. Call Advantage Gold right now. 800-900-8000. See if you qualify to get your special Mark Levin discount worth up to $1,300 today. Performance may vary. Past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results. You should always consult your financial and tax professional.
Mark Levin, radio's principal patriot. Call in now at 877-381-3811.
Our buddy Brad Smith, the former chairman of the Federal Election Commission, who Judge Merchan didn't want anywhere near the courthouse, explaining federal campaign law that nobody else in the courthouse knows or understands, let alone the jury, certainly not the judge. He pointed out that let's look at the reporting schedules required for this non-disclosure agreement, if there was one, showing that even if they thought it was a campaign expenditure to be reported, an expenditure made on October 27, that's when the non-disclosure agreement money was given to Daniel's attorney, would not under law be reported until December 8th, a full 30 days after the election. His point is, so even if they did what they didn't need to do under the law, it wouldn't have mattered. It wouldn't have mattered. The money went to Daniel's attorney from the non-disclosure agreement on October 27, a week or so before the election, and under federal campaign law, it's not reported until December 8th, a full 30 days after the election. So the jury doesn't get to hear that. The jury doesn't get to hear Brad Smith say it. And those are the reporting schedules under the federal campaign laws. Those are the reporting schedules. So Smith would have testified, not only is there not a federal campaign issue, not only is there not a federal campaign violation, not only did the Federal Election Commission say there was no campaign violation and passed on it, but if Trump knew that there was a campaign issue, which clearly he wouldn't, and if they reported it, it would have been reported on December 8th. So how could there be a reporting violation? Oh, my God. You know, to deny the jury essential, material, critical, factual information about the law as it applies to these events is outrageous. It's absolutely outrageous. So this is what I call, as you've heard me before, a Potemkin courthouse. We have a fake prosecutor, a fake judge. God knows about the jury. We have a fake justice system. All to go through the motions as if there's due process, there's rules of evidence, there's precedent on things you can do and things you can't do. That charges, by the way, civil charges too, but criminal charges need to be specific and detailed so somebody knows what it is they're accused of and how to defend against it. Put yourself in these shoes, America. Joe Biden is a loathsome cancer on the body politic. He always has been. Tell me anything he's ever done that's benefited this country. Anything. Anything. He has spent half a century in Washington, D.C., accumulating power, enriching his family and himself, and he will do anything for re-election. Want me to prove it to you yet again? Of course, he's thrown Israel under the bus. He has embraced the Islamo-Nazis. He's embraced here at home the Islamists, the River to the Sea crowd. He's embraced the Hitler Youth and the Marxists. He figures, I got to hold on to Michigan at any cost. I got to hold on to Michigan at any cost. And it doesn't mean his cost, of course. It means the cost of everybody else and their lives and their livelihoods and so forth. But what else is he doing? There was an unbelievable story. Unbelievable. Even in the world of disbelief, it was unbelievable. And I'm reading this over the weekend. A Wall Street Journal news story. The United Nations organization, the IAEA, doesn't matter, but the organization that oversees nuclear activities, nuclear development, nuclear building, that sort of thing, is now saying openly in a report to the world that Iran has 60%, I'll use Mark's language, material that can be used in a nuclear weapon. And they said to go from 60 to 90% is the blink of an eye. Once you hit that magic 60% number, you're moments away from having a nuclear weapon. In Iran's case, they already have the intercontinental ballistic missiles, the not hypersonic, but the supersonic missiles. They fired them at Israel. But they're within an eyelash of putting a nuclear warhead on them. This has caused Britain and France, among other countries, to say, there's a big meeting coming up. It's this week or next week. We want to formally rebuke Iran. We want to punish Iran. We want to put sanctions on Iran. And here's the story. Ready for this? Joe Biden and Blinken are pressuring Britain and France not to even rebuke Iran, and they're doing the same with other allies. Why, you ask? Because they don't want any problems before the election. They don't want any problems before the election. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I want to read this to you in a little bit more detail because where I come from, this is treason. I don't say that lightly. But Joe Biden has funded Iran. He's armed Iran. And now, not only are we going to do nothing about Iran getting nukes, he's pressuring UK and France and others to do nothing as well. Here it is. I found it in Britain's Mirror, but it was reported first by the Wall Street Journal. Joe Biden is opposing a European plan to rebuke Iran for advances in its nuclear program as Washington wants to avoid an escalation of tensions ahead of the presidential election, diplomats involved in discussions have claimed. Now, just listen to that. They impeached Donald Trump for a perfectly legitimate and reasonable phone call with Zelensky, who Zelensky said there was no pressure, there was no quid pro quo, but they didn't care. We have a president, a friggin' president of the United States, pressuring our European allies, who are stronger than we are in this, not to rebuke Iran for its advances in its nuclear program in violation of all international law. Because he doesn't want to hurt his election, for God's sakes. But he's going to give a speech, you see, from the Oval Office, I guess, on Trump. The Biden administration is said to be arguing against an effort by Britain and France to censure Iran at the International Atomic Energy Agency's member state board in early June, they added, while U.S. officials deny lobbying against a resolution. The diplomats say the administration is pressing other countries to abstain in a censure vote, which is what Washington will do. Western officials have become concerned that Iran's nuclear activities, as according to the International Atomic Energy Agency, that's the UN, IAEA data, the country has enough highly enriched fissile material for 3 nuclear weapons. While U.S. officials fear Iran could be more volatile as it seeks to elect a new leader after the death of President Islamo-Nazi in a helicopter crash, the Biden administration has long said it is seeking a diplomatic solution. A diplomatic solution! With a terrorist state. The European diplomats have reportedly become frustrated as they feel like the United States is trying to undermine their approach as they seek to take action against Iran, according to the Wall Street Journal. However, this was denied by a U.S. official who said Washington is tightly coordinated with its European partners ahead of the IAEA board meeting next month. The problem is it's multiple foreign diplomats who have spoken to the Wall Street Journal. The official said the U.S. is increasing pressure on Iran through sanctions and international isolation. Noted that any speculation about the decisions is premature. Do you believe this crap? Do you believe the future for our children and grandchildren are being handed over to these sellouts who are selling out America for Biden's re-election? This is why I said at the beginning of this, Biden will do anything for power and money. Anything. Anything. Another official told the Wall Street Journal it's totally false that Washington's trying to avoid tensions with Iran before the U.S. election. Off the record, of course. The IAEA board last passed a resolution rebuking. We actually have the UN's group, the IAEA, Britain and France, who want to rebuke Iran and us trying to pull them back. Can you believe this, folks? Can you believe this? U.S. and European officials have warned they would take action if Tehran did not rein in its nuclear advances and step up cooperation with the UN agencies. Tensions have reportedly risen as some European countries, particularly France and Britain, are concerned that Washington lacks a strategy for dealing with Iran's nuclear advances. In the West, there are growing fears Iran could seek to become a nuclear weapon state, and at the end of April, the IAEA boss warned the country was just weeks away from having enough enriched uranium to develop a nuclear bomb. Director General Rafi al-Grassi revealed Iran's nuclear activities were raising eyebrows at the IAEA and said they are weeks rather than months away from being able to produce nuclear bombs, plural. He admitted that does not mean that Iran has or would have a nuclear weapon in that time of space, but he said uranium enrichment at near weapons-grade levels is a cause for alarm. Well, what are they making this fissile material for, Mr. Producer? Just so they can, what, watch glowing fissile material? To make nuclear weapons. A functional nuclear warhead requires many other independents from the production of material. He also said, look, if North Korea can make it, Iran will make it. Because North Korea is helping Iran. Last month, an expert told the Mirror that the risk of terror attacks taking place in the UK could be heightened if the conflict goes on with their usual crap. Anyway, you understand. The key for you to understand is that Joe Biden is not looking out for America. He's not looking out for free peoples throughout the world. He is the best friend Iran, the Islamo-Nazi regime in Iran could ever have. Ever, and Blinken too. Can you think of another Democrat president other than Obama, quite frankly, who would conduct himself this way? Would Franklin Roosevelt? Would Harry Truman? Would John Kennedy or Lyndon Johnson? Bill Clinton? No, I can't even imagine Bill Clinton doing this. This guy is openly selling out to Iran. Openly selling out to Iran. Tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars, directly and indirectly, to Iran. Trump was destroying that regime. It was on its back. The people were rising up. They hate that government that rapes them, tortures them, murders them. Biden is actually funding a government that slaughters its own people while he's whining about Israel. And by the way, 31 people shot in Chicago over the weekend. 7 of them died, I believe. One of them is a 5-year-old beautiful little girl. And Biden says nothing. He's focused on, Gaza. Biden says nothing about Chicago. Not a damn thing. Nothing. And when he says it's guns, no, it's not guns, you idiot. It's your prosecutors and your judges, like Merchan, like Bragg. It's the Democrat Party that's destroying us from within and without. The Biden-Blinken regime are pressuring our European allies, led by Britain and France, against rebuking Iran for its advances in the nuclear program, against them censuring Iran, against them sanctioning Iran before the election. America, is Joe Biden's political career worth a nuclearized Iran? Is it worth Israel surrendering to Hamas? Is it worth another 10, 15, 20 million illegal aliens coming across the border? Is it really worth it, America? I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
All over the world, our enemies are on the move. And in our own country, same thing. Things are tough between rising prices, election issues, a $34 trillion debt. But folks, there is good news. If you're smart, you can use these problems to your advantage. By making the right choices right now, you can keep your retirement money safe and even make more money in this climate. That's where Advantage Gold comes in. They're experts in helping Americans protect their savings with gold and silver. It's called diversification. Call Advantage Gold today, 800-900-8000. They'll send you a free 2024 gold and silver kit that tells you how to keep your money safe when things are bad. Tell them I sent you, and you may qualify for a special Mark Levin discount worth up to $1,300. Call Advantage Gold at 800-900-8000, 800-900-8000. See if you qualify for that special discount worth up to $1,300. That's 800-900-8000. Performance may vary. Past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results. You should always consult your financial and tax professionals. All right, just writing something to myself here, Mr. Producer. A little inside baseball here, folks. My printer's not working. Now, what that requires me to do is to be the Houdini of broadcasting right now. I have to use my iPhone. I have to use my laptop. Right, Mr. Producer? And let's see here. And then I've got to buy time, like right now. Here we are. I'll be right back. This segment of the podcast is exclusively sponsored by Pure Talk. Pure Talk offers great coverage and can save your family money on your wireless bill every single month. Go to puretalk.com to find the plan that's right for you. Thank you again for listening, and thank you so much for this sponsorship, Pure Talk.
He's here. He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, America. Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811. 877-381-3811. Well, so much here. I'm trying to decide what to do, but I think I will move into this direction a little bit. Rashida Tlaib, as Mike Lawler, who we had on the program from New York, put it, should be removed from Congress immediately. Associating with and speaking before groups that are funded by U.S. designated terrorist organizations is disqualifying. And he's referring to this post by OSINT Defender. And it happens to be true. There is a video of this. A sitting member of Congress, Rashida Tlaib, was a speaker yesterday, 2 days ago, at the People's Conference for Palestine, which was funded and supported by the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, a communist terrorist group which is headquartered in the Syrian capital of Damascus. The group has been designated a foreign terrorist organization by the United States, Japan, Canada, and the European Union. Yet a member of the House of Representatives thought it would be a good idea to speak at a conference which was promoted by this group. Ladies and gentlemen, what is it going to take for us to get our country back? She's obviously, remember when she had a map in her office that didn't have the state of Israel? Remember the river to the sea? She was chanting that stuff, and she's obviously not a representative of the United States. She represents Hamas, Hezbollah, the PLO, the Muslim Brotherhood, CARE, Students for Justice in Palestine, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, a communist terrorist group. I mean, that's who she represents. And she's not alone. Omar and others. You see, the problem is, ladies and gentlemen, I really want you to think about it. The Democrat Party has decided that this is part of their base. They've decided that the imams and the River to the Sea crowd in Dearbornistan, Michigan, are part of their base. They decided that the Hitler Youth on our college campuses, supported by the tenured Islamist Nazis and Marxists, are part of their base. And you even see radical left-wing Jews embrace this. Schumer is a perfect example. Bernie Sanders is more than a perfect example. I've explained all this over the months. In fact, I think it was even in part of the best of, wasn't it, Mr. Producer? I think so. That we played yesterday. And, of course, we have Blinken, Sullivan, the other reprobates at the Department of State, the National Security Council. We have an individual who is an activist for the Students for the Liberation of Palestine, which, of course, is a Marxist/Islamist front group supported by Hamas. What do you think of that? So I'm wondering if the Republicans in the House are going to get behind this movement to expel her. Not to reprimand her, not to censure, to remove her. When I first came into the Reagan administration, how old was I? 23 years old, give or take? I'd graduated law school, I think it was 22, something like that, 23 or so. I went into the Reagan administration. And we had an FBI background check. FBI. And it took months. And they wanted to know everything. Everything. And you fill out the paperwork. And if you were deceiving or misleading or just flat out lying, you filled that out under the penalty of perjury. And there were questions about your associations with different groups. And they wanted to know if you were a communist. They wanted to know if you were a terrorist. They wanted to know if you spoke at certain types of groups or received honorarium or did legal work or did whatever it was. They wanted to know so they knew what they were dealing with. You want a position in the federal government. There's a few thousand so-called political or non-career positions that an administration appoints individuals, and they want to know because you are to take an oath. I had to take an oath to support the United States of America. Seems like it's a long time. It seems awfully quaint now, doesn't it, Mr. Producer? How would half the Biden people ever get appointed? How would half the Obama people ever get appointed? How would Obama even become president, given his associations with communists and Islamists? But there you have it. That's the Democrat Party. So the Democrat Party has fundamentally transformed our country. And we're in the middle of it right now. Who would have ever thought a president of the United States would be pressuring our allies not to rebuke the Islamist, mass-murdering, genocidal, American-hating regime from getting a nuclear weapon and aiming them at us? And yet that's what Biden's doing. Who would have ever thought we have a president of the United States that's actually funding our enemy? Funding our enemy. Not just appeasing it, funding it. Who would have thought? And yet there he is. And yet still you have numbskulls in your families, friends, associates, politicians, mental cases like De Niro, real head case. That Biden has to get elected to protect us from a dictator. You know the BS. It's shocking. And here we have Tlaib, and she'll get elected over and over and over and over again. But Congress has a responsibility, both houses, to police their members. Now, what is worse? What is worse? Tlaib and her affiliations with and support for terrorist organizations? Or some congressman illegally using a few stamps, Mr. Producer? If you find a member of Congress that's using stamps paid for by us to send notes to his wife, I love you, honey, it's Mother's Day, they're up on charges in the House. I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm saying, how about some perspective and priorities here? How about it? Well, how about it? So Mike Lawler is correct. And I'm hoping the Freedom Caucus will get involved. Will they? Will you, boys and girls? I'm hoping all Republicans in the House will unite and demand her expulsion. Not because she's Palestinian. No. Because she's Hamas. Because she's the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, a terrorist group. If there were a Republican who spoke at a neo-Nazi group or a Klan organization that was constantly voting against the rights of black people, or resolutions condemning those who are discriminating against black people, do you think that Republican would be praised and embraced by the Republican Party? No, they'd kick their ass out. Why does Biden praise her? She's scum. Why? Tlaib should be expelled. Congress belongs to us, the American people. Not one district in the country, to the whole country. I think we've tolerated this long enough, don't you, America? And any member of the House who comes on this show in the future, I'm going to ask them if they will support expelling Rashida Tlaib for who she associates with, who she supports, and who she represents. No, not the people in old Conyers district. No. Hamas. Hezbollah. The PLO. The Muslim Brotherhood. CARE, which was created by Hamas. Oh, yes. How is it that they get away with what they get away with in our country? Why don't they shut CARE down? Don't give me this free speech crap. They're the enemy. We know this thanks to the FBI. We know it because of the wiretapped meeting at a Marriott hotel outside the Philadelphia International Airport. They said what they were going to do. Create CARE. A front group. Claims to be a civil rights group. When are we going to protect ourselves as a country? When we throw Biden out and elect Trump. That's when we'll protect ourselves as a country. When you appoint somebody at Department of Homeland Security that goes through these student visas and sees who's here and who shouldn't be here. When the Federal Bureau of Investigation does its actual job, which is to kick these terrorist bastards out of this country. From wherever they come. Regardless. To secure the border. The Democrats want to do everything possible for you to forget what it was like under Trump. The economy, until the pandemic hit. The border. Support for our military. A sound dollar. Peace in the Middle East. China and Russia wetting themselves. They dare not move while Trump is president. NATO getting a tongue lashing from Trump and increasing their spending, which they were supposed to do in the first place. I mean, you look at all of it. Constitutional judges. Nikki Haley runs around like she's God's gift. Nikki Haley wouldn't even be on the national scene but for Trump. Chris Christie, a failed presidential candidate twice. Republicans don't want him. Trump takes him under his wing, and of course, Chris Christie stabs him in the back. There's a lot of those ilks around. But the fact is, here's the truth. Donald Trump is a more conservative president, even though he's not ideological about it. He views it as common sense, and that's good. I'm much more philosophical about it, but if we get to the same place 98% of the time, what's wrong with that? Trump loves the country. Trump was more conservative as a president than Bush 43 or Bush 41. Which is why so many of the Bushies hate his guts. He was much more conservative than Bush 43 or Bush 41. In fact, he was much more conservative than Richard Nixon. Who did some very good things, by the way, but very poor things domestically as well. Maybe I'll do a show on him one day if people care. But nonetheless, Trump's more conservative than Mitch McConnell and the Senate leadership. It's the truth. Trump's the most conservative president we've had since Ronald Reagan. And we've really only had 3 substantively conservative presidents, really, the last century and the beginning of this century. Calvin Coolidge, Ronald Reagan, and Donald Trump. That's the truth. Go back to McKinley, perhaps. Taft, somewhat. Theodore Roosevelt, no way. Theodore Roosevelt was a national progressive. He ran on the Progressive Party as a third-party candidate, Bull Moose Party. He used to write pieces that appeared in the New Republic. I know all about him. People tout him. McCain used to tout him, which is about right for those two. He wasn't horrible. He wasn't Woodrow Wilson, but he wasn't a conservative. Coolidge. Reagan. Trump. Those are the 3 conservatives in the last 120, 125 years, give or take. Truthfully. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
We're so fortunate in this country to have a military of men and women who voluntarily lay their lives on the line for us. But when their service ends, transition to civilian life can be very difficult, especially now. Access to housing, employment, even their earned VA benefits can be very difficult. That's why Pure Talk proudly helps support America's Warrior Partnership and their mission to prevent veteran suicide. This is very important. You can join the fight when you switch to Pure Talk's 5G service and help Pure Talk support this great charity. Remember, Pure Talk was founded by a veteran. Through the end of the month, they'll match every dollar donated up to $50,000. Folks, choose a wireless company that shares your values. Upgrade your cell phone service to America's most dependable 5G network. Just $20 a month. Go to puretalk.com/Levin. puretalk.com/Levin. Make the switch, folks. That's puretalk.com/Levin. Levin. For superior cell phone service that's half the price of Verizon, AT&T, or T-Mobile, and to help Pure Talk help our vets. Rashida Tlaib, speaking with her terrorist friends. Go.
Attacking the authority of the International Criminal Court and interfering in the legal process is nothing more than an attempt to prevent the genocidal maniac Netanyahu and his senior Israeli officials from being held accountable for those crimes against humanity. You are an enabler, President Biden. But wait. You know when my colleagues are outraged? They're outraged over the protest on college campuses in our country. They're more outraged than that, than the atrocities happening right now on the ground in Palestine, the war crimes. Y'all, there's no universities in Gaza. We all know this. We say it over and over again. And now, if they get their way, they're going to silence the university.
Next cut, Mr. Producer, go.
I don't need to tell you that you're on the right side. I don't need to. But I'll be damned if I wait 10 years before they apologize to all of you for doing what was right at this moment. Each year, our country, and I say our country because it is our country, sends billions of dollars to maintain an apartheid government and support the ongoing ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. It is disgraceful.
Shut up, you idiot. You moron. You should be expelled. Absolutely 100%. Not because she doesn't agree with me. That's not why you expel somebody. She can give that speech anywhere she wants to anyone she wants, but terrorists. Or an organization that is a terrorist organization. By the way, Joe Biden met with his ex-daughter-in-law. Did you see this, Mr. Producer? Who's a key witness in the upcoming Hunter trial. You know what we call that? Witness tampering. Witness tampering. Right in front of our eyes. Witness tampering. And nobody gives a crap. Whew. We'll be right back. We're so fortunate in this country to have a military of men and women who voluntarily lay their lives on the line for us. But when their service ends, transition to civilian life can be very difficult, especially now. Access to housing, employment, even their earned VA benefits can be very difficult. That's why Pure Talk proudly helps support America's Warrior Partnership and their mission to prevent veteran suicide. This is very important. You can join the fight when you switch to Pure Talk's 5G service and help Pure Talk support this great charity. Remember, Pure Talk was founded by a veteran. Through the end of the month, they'll match every dollar donated up to $50,000. Folks, choose a wireless company that shares your values. Upgrade your cell phone service to America's most dependable 5G network. Just $20 a month. Go to puretalk.com/Levin. puretalk.com/Levin. Make the switch, folks. That's puretalk.com/Levin. Levin. For superior cell phone service that's half the price of Verizon, AT&T, or T-Mobile, and to help Pure Talk help our vets.
The Mike Levin Show. This is the home of the July 4th Americans. And you can call at 877-381-3811.
July 4th. That hasn't been replaced with Juneteenth, has it, Mr. Producer? Keeping on and getting very confused. The verdict on the Trump judge bias, the hunch money case, is guilty. The wonderful Miranda Devine, writing over the weekend. And by the way, hope you had a blessed weekend. I hope you remembered the people who aren't with us anymore who made that possible. Anyway, here's what she says. Joe Biden is salivating at the prospect of his political arch-rival being convicted in the Stormy Daniels hush money trial in Manhattan with jury deliberations this week. If Donald Trump is found guilty in the first criminal prosecution of a former president, it'll be a travesty of justice and a clear attempt to rig the 2024 election. Of this, there is no question, America. She goes on. But the ploy risks backfiring on Biden in the same way the Republican attacks on Clinton over his affair with White House intern Monica Lewinsky did. Voters look dimly on the abuse of legal power to police private morals, and even though Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg has tried to dress up his prosecution of Trump as a campaign finance violation, it's obvious to everyone the whole point was to be prurient, retelling of his alleged affair. According to Politico, as soon as the jury comes back, Biden will deliver a statement addressing the verdict in a White House setting, not a campaign one, to show his statement isn't political. Now, does anyone believe that? To show his statement isn't political? Nothing Biden can say will be cleansed of the taint of political dirty tricks, no matter how hard his media handmaidens try to characterize his attitude as taking a vow of silence and classify as rising above the sordid legal woes of his opponent. Biden has been taking plenty of sly digs, like when he challenged Trump to a debate and said, "I hear you have Wednesdays free. Wednesdays are the day the trial doesn't run." During a speech at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, he quipped, "I had a great stretch since the State of the Union, but Donald has had a few tough days lately. You might call it stormy weather." Wow, funny. The real joke is pretending that Biden is decorously avoiding making hay from his rival's mounting legal troubles. He is just trying to avoid fueling the suspicion that he weaponized the DOJ to go after his political rival, aided by Democratic DAs Alvin Bragg in New York and Fani Willis in Georgia, because he has nothing in the way of achievements or vision to run on his own right. Literally nothing. Nothing. By bleeding Trump of money and time to campaign in battleground states, and by dirtying up his image, Biden obviously is getting an unfair advantage, and he just can't resist rubbing it in with cheap shots. His surrogates never stop talking about Trump's trials, and Super PAC, laughably called Unite the Country, is spending $40 million on ads targeting Trump's legal issues. Not that it's done any good, with polling showing the indictments are political rocket fuel for the former president. It's clear to even Trump-deranged observers that Manhattan Supreme Court acting Justice Juan Merchan is a political hack. He was cautioned last year by the New York State Commission on Judicial Conduct over donations, albeit modest, to Biden and other Democrats. His daughter, Lauren Merchan, has been profiting from the trial through her consulting firm as her Democrat clients reportedly raised millions in campaign donations through emails citing the trial over which her father is presiding. How do they get away with this? It was no-brainer for Merchan to recuse himself, and yet he refused, sullying the reputation of the New York legal system. He's a hitman. That's what he is. Think Stalin. He's not going anywhere. In fact, he will be praised to the hilt. They'll be slobbering all over him if there's a guilty verdict on any of these charges. 34 of them. And they did that just to try and get one. That's all we need is one. Rather than demonstrating that his personal political bent has no bearing on his courtroom conduct, Merchan has been a paragon of bias. He gave free rein to prosecution star witness Michael Cohen, Trump's former lawyer, a convicted perjurer and con man, who stole $60,000 from Trump. By contrast, the judge muzzled defense witnesses if he allowed them to be called at all. Take the day that Cohen's former lawyer, Bob Costello, took the stand, a well-respected former prosecutor, deputy chief of the criminal division, the Southern District of New York. Costello runs rings around Merchan in terms of reputation, skill, and experience, which may explain why the judge was so thin-skinned and insecure during his testimony. Costello was able to contradict Cohen's sworn testimony that Trump ordered him to make the payments, saying that as desperate and maniac as Cohen was to avoid going to jail, he'd insisted to his lawyers that Trump knew nothing about those payments. Testimony was crucial to Trump's defense, or would have been, if Merchan hadn't sustained every prosecution objection, accused Costello of giving him side-eye and staring him down, thrown the media and public out of the courtroom, which, by the way, is unconstitutional, and generally indicated to the jurors that Costello was a poor witness. Juries are always stuck in some sort of Stockholm Syndrome relationship with their judges, so Merchan's attitude toward the witness has a profound effect on how much weight they gave to his testimony. Constitutional lawyer David Schoen, he's a good friend of mine, this guy is the best, who defended Trump in his first impeachment, said Merchan's conduct was shocking and reprehensible. The judge never told Costello that he'd ordered very narrow limitations on his testimony. For that matter, Trump's lawyers should have warned Costello instead of having the prosecution object to every second thing he said, leading to understandable frustration. Well, the judge should not have limited him. But saying geez under his breath was not a capital offense, says Schoen. It's difficult to see how the judge could have seen Costello rolling his eyes as his back was turned towards Merchan. Merchan closing the courtroom and accusing Bob of staring him down is beyond bizarre. Telling him his conduct was in contempt was totally inappropriate. I say it was unconstitutional. And so does Schoen here. By clearing the courtroom, Schoen says he believes Merchan violated the Sixth Amendment right to a public trial, 100%. And he cited other cases in New York of convictions being reversed because a judge, for instance, sent a defendant's father out of the courtroom to make room for prospective jurors, and it goes on. And it goes on. Now, all our talking about this, or my talking, and you're listening, I suppose, doesn't change a damn thing. Goes on in that courtroom because the jury's not listening. But we hope that there's at least one juror who sees through all this. This prosecution now is drawn on for 5 hours or more. 5 hours or more. They're throwing everything humanly possible so they can get just one of the 34 charges. Just one of them. That's all they want. One of them. Get one. It's time well spent. That's how they think. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
We're so fortunate in this country to have a military of men and women who voluntarily lay their lives on the line for us. But when their service ends, transition to civilian life can be very difficult, especially now. Access to housing, employment, even their earned VA benefits can be very difficult. That's why Pure Talk proudly helps support America's Warrior Partnership and their mission to prevent veteran suicide. This is very important. You can join the fight when you switch to Pure Talk's 5G service and help Pure Talk support this great charity. Remember, Pure Talk was founded by a veteran. Through the end of the month, they'll match every dollar donated up to $50,000. Folks, choose a wireless company that shares your values. Upgrade your cell phone service to America's most dependable 5G network. Just $20 a month. Go to puretalk.com/Levin. puretalk.com/Levin. Make the switch, folks. That's puretalk.com/Levin. Levin. For superior cell phone service that's half the price of Verizon, AT&T, or T-Mobile, and to help Pure Talk help our vets. Prosecution is still going on in its closing statement, and I'm telling you why. They're throwing everything they can think of against the wall. They know they have 34 charges out there. They only need one guilty on one of those charges to have a conviction. And I thought of another. The more time they spend speaking, the less time they hope the jurors will remember what the defense said. What the defense said. And the prosecution's arguing now about a general intent to commit fraud. Look at the facts as a whole. That's not how it works. You need to have a specific intent, not a general intent. And, of course, the judge is allowing this to go on and on and on and on. And, yes, Donald Trump will win on appeal. But the question is, appeal to whom and what? And I'm working on that now with a friend of mine. And we'll get into this when I'm ready to. There was a massive hit piece done on our friend Rick Grenell in the New York Slimes. It was brought to my attention by my buddy Tom Rose. And so what's happening now is there's some fear that Biden's going to lose. Now, look, I'm not trying to be a wet blanket, but these bastards cheat. And I don't mean with machines. I mean they change the laws on when to count ballots, how to count ballots, when to file your ballots, whether there's a signature, a date, a drop box. And this is how we lose in many respects. We now know that a lot of localities are trying to register illegal aliens. And when that happens and you get rid of voter ID in some of these blue areas, it's impossible to know who they are. It's just not possible. And that's why the Democrat Party, through their media, keeps saying, are you going to accept the election result? No, we'll see what happens. Did Al Gore accept the election results? No. Oh, okay. Did Tilden accept the election results? No. Who's he? Look it up. Oh, okay. Did Stacey Abrams? Did Hillary Clinton? Did Al Gore? I mentioned them. I think I did. A long list of reprobates. But their media's out there. They want to know in advance, you see. And Joe Biden's using the federal government to register Democrats and to get out the vote. Another crime that goes unpunished. Now, speaking of, Mr. Producer, I don't want to miss this as time goes on here, ladies and gentlemen. Got a fantastic tweet from my friend Peter Schweitzer. And this information is serious information. And he sends me the PDF with the information that's in it. Shortly after Patrick Ho of the CEFC, this is the Communist Chinese Oil Company Front Group, who paid the Bidens millions, I think it was like 10 million. Shortly after he was arrested for bribery and espionage in New York City, Hunter Biden set up a WeChat account. Ever hear that, Mr. Producer? That's a Chinese app. Now, why did he set up the WeChat account, America? Anybody know? Does he speak Cantonese? No. He can barely speak English. To talk about the case, the espionage case against Patrick Ho, who paid the Biden millions, with his dad and Uncle James. Are you kidding me? No, I'm not kidding you. The House Ways and Means Committee released the information. And name, Hunter and Jim / start time, source, and it goes on. And there are redactions. It's a WhatsApp, whatsapp.net. And it explains it line by line. These are the communications. These are the messages. With his father, Joe. Didn't Joe Biden say, I don't know anything about my son's businesses. We've never discussed them. How many more lies are we going to put up with this bastard? He's destroying our country. He's destroying our border, our foreign policy. He's destroying Israel. He's destroyed our economy. And he just keeps lying.
He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, America. Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811, 877-381-3811. We'll have Rick Grenell on the next segment of the program. President Trump outside the New York courthouse this morning. You realize he's been there since this morning, and it's after 8 p.m. now, Eastern? Cut 7, go.
Mark Levin, same thing. The Bragg case is about lawfare run amok against a former president running again for president. It also represents the greatest effort to interfere with and steal an election. Donald Trump did nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong. This is everybody saying it. Except we have a judge who's corrupt. We have a judge who's conflicted. You know what the conflict is, so do I, but I can't say it because I'm under a gag order, which is another unconstitutional thing. You ever hear of a president, leading candidate, leading Biden, leading everybody, and have a gag order? I'm not allowed to speak. It's a first. No president has not been allowed to speak.
Just unbelievable. My heart really goes out to this man and his family. It's just friggin' unbelievable. Michael Tyler is the Biden campaign communications director. There he is outside of the courthouse. This just further underscores that this is a contrived Democrat Party, Soviet-style, star chamber kangaroo court. And you should be furious about this. And those of you who are on the fence, this should push you on our side of the fence. And this prosecution going on for at least 5 hours, throwing all kinds of mud and baloney all over the place, the judge was more than happy to allow it. More than happy. Because the fix is in. Now, if one of the jurors decides not to go in with the fix, God bless that juror. That juror will be a hero. But as far as the judge is concerned, the instructions are tomorrow, and I'm telling you now, the fix is in. And if it is a hung jury or a not guilty, unanimous jury, great. But now there's talk, according to Turley, that maybe he'll say you don't need a unanimous court. Anything's possible. Anything. Maybe they'll take him out back and put an end to the whole thing. Who the hell knows? So here's this Michael Tyler. He's there with De Niro. And for radio purposes, we couldn't drown the sound of the F word enough, so I'm not going to play a De Niro. And who needs to hear this slob anyway? He's a pig. Mr. Tough Guy, 80 years old, about 5'7", roaming around there with bodyguards. Bodyguards, you puke. That's what we need. An 80-year-old white guy defending an 82-year-old white guy, Mr. Producer. What about that? Anyway, Michael Tyler is the communications director. There they are at the courthouse, and there they are announcing that Joe Biden's going to give a presidential speech, not a campaign speech. So all the networks cover it as a presidential, statesman-like speech after the jury publicly gives its verdict. Here's this guy, Tyler. Cut 8, go.
We're not here today because of what's going on over there. We're here today because you all are here. And so we are proud, we are glad that you're all here this morning. We're here primarily because of the threat that Donald Trump poses to the United States of America and to our democracy.
Now, I'm glad I posted this. That long statement I posted about this trial, I said, there they are. There's De Niro while closing statements are being made. Right, Mr. Producer? That's been up now, what, almost 3 hours? I mentioned it on the air. Of course, all the backbenchers now are regurgitating that. Yes, it was intended to influence the jury because the jury is not sequestered. The jury's going to know that De Niro was out there. That's why he was there, to influence the jury. That's my point in what I posted almost 3 hours ago. Yes, they're doing everything they can now to take the focus off of Biden. Biden and his support for terrorists in the Middle East and his support for Iran, defending Iran. You notice this story that I mentioned about Iran, it's not anywhere. Our president of the United States is trying to prevent our allies in Europe from rebuking and censuring Iran for its nuclear activities. Has anybody heard that anywhere else? I don't know. Has it been on TV? I don't know. I've been too busy, but I'm not hearing a lot of it. Isn't that a big deal? It's not a big deal? That he's giving aid and comfort and support to a regime to get nuclear weapons? That's not a big deal? Randy Zellin, Z-E-L-I-N, is a legal analyst with the Constipated News Network today. At least he is right now. Kate Boldon, or whatever the hell her name is a left-wing kook who pretends she's a host. Cut 10, go.
The burden of proof is an important one to remind everyone. It's on the prosecution, right? They need to prove beyond reasonable doubt that that Donald Trump broke the law. And you think, after listening to all of this, you think they fell short. How?
They fell
Notice, by the way, she doesn't say what law. Go ahead.
Because let's start with reasonable doubt. What is reasonable doubt? And it's not simply a doubt based upon reason. Anytime a human being needs to make an important decision in life, if you have enough information, for example, doctor says you need open heart surgery. Doc, go ahead and schedule. I don't have a reasonable doubt. Conversely, if I say, I appreciate it, but I need a second opinion, I need more information, that is having a reasonable doubt. There is reasonable doubt all over this case. Where is Keith Schiller? Where is Alan Weisselberg? How did Michael Cohen get away with stealing $30,000? Hold a pity party for him. Made $4 million on this. Thought he'd be chief of staff. He's a fixer. If the plumber comes to my house to fix my leak, I could be home. That doesn't mean I know how he's doing it and what it's taking to be fixed. Stormy Daniels, let's hold a pity party for her. Why do we need to know whether or not the former president wore a condom or not? It's simply about, did the former president know that books, his records, false entries for legal fees? Michael Cohen was his lawyer. Did he intend to cover up the election or to protect his family? It's everywhere.
Mm-hmm. This guy is an honest lawyer because he's on the Constipated News Network where fake tap out. I wasn't really impressed with the defense closing. You wouldn't be, schmuck. It wasn't for you. You're too stupid to understand it. You're too ideological to even care about it. So they have this guy, Eddie Claudet, or whatever the hell his name is, on MSLSD. Listen to this guy. Cut 11, go.
First of all, what Trump is appealing to is what, Frederick Douglass talked about in July 5th of 1852. He said there's a horrible reptile in the bosom of the nation. And that reptile for him was slavery. It was a certain set of assumptions, not just simply about black people, but about the superiority of white people to own black people. And he said we must rip that reptile from our hearts. But, it's the central contradiction. It's the contradiction that eats at the entrails of the country. And Donald Trump is appealing to those grievances, those hatreds, those old ghosts, as President Biden says, those old ghosts that have the nation by the throat.
You're such an a-hole. You're such a fraud. You are a puke. President Biden, you quote, in the same paragraph as Frederick Douglass. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me, Eddie? May I call you Eddie? I'm calling you Eddie. You like it, Eddie? I don't care. You quote Frederick Douglass in the same paragraph. You talk about old ghosts, as President Biden says. He is an old ghost, you jerk. Little does he recall here on MSNBC Biden's past, which is grievous, which is vile. Trump doesn't have any of it. And there you stand, Eddie Claudet. I really don't know his name, but that's the way it's spelled. Junior, I'm sorry, not to be confused with senior. There you stand, defending the man who said he didn't want his kids to go to a place that's like a jungle. And I paraphrase, it's worse, actually. It's worse. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
We have a good friend. We have many good friends in this program. I have many enemies, too, actually. But Rick Grenell is a good friend. Rick Grenell is really was ambassador to Germany, and actually more than that, had a lot of influence over foreign policy with President Trump, and for good reason. He's a smart guy. And then I'm alerted to this article, and I won't spend the whole interview on this, Rick. Just a vicious, vile, long New York Times piece where they even talk about your dog, for God's sakes, and the words they use, and of course they go to the likes of Susan Wright and those types of people. But what do you make of this attack? It's a preemptive attack, isn't it?
Yeah, I actually was pretty proud of it, the fact that Susan Rice hates
Susan Rice, so I'm sorry.
And,
yeah,
Susan Rice put me down for being the opposite of whatever Susan Rice wants. the fact that she thinks that I'm an enemy of hers should tell you exactly all you need to know. Look at this reporter. She's written several profiles of me. And, they're not really profiles. They're just hit pieces. My response is I don't pay for the firewall of the New York Times. So what one reporter says about me doesn't bother me, and my mother doesn't pay for the New York Times. So I really don't care.
Mm-hmm. But what do you think's behind it? They must view you as a danger, because they don't just do things for... It's like they're going after Alito now because of two flags. They only go after people they fear, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think, they have a worldview that basically they want consensus in the world. They want the lowest common denominator of what everyone agrees with so that somehow we sit around a campfire and sing Kumbaya. But that's a newsroom view of the world. That's not a diplomat's view of the world. It's not anything other than kind of reading press releases and trying to figure out, what to do in the Middle East. What I believe is that when America puts itself first, then the world sees the rule of law, capitalism. It's a whole line of healthy rules. And what I've learned doing foreign policy for so long is that other leaders are craving that, Mark. They really want there to be U.S. leadership because they know we don't conquer. They know we don't seize and take over. We're not the perfect nation, but we certainly have a perfect system, which means transparency, debate, and trying to get to a more perfect union. One of the things that I think we conservatives are frustrated with is the attack that the Democrats are doing on this system. And I can tell you, as I travel the world meeting with left, right, and center leaders, there's this whole narrative that the New York Times is pushing that I only meet with far-right leaders. I've met with socialist leaders. I've met with far-left leaders. The president of Colombia. I've met with people who fundamentally have a different worldview, but I want to extend a hand and have a conversation with them because I'm unafraid about our ideas. I think our ideas are superior. And if you have a calm debate, you're going to show them eventually that capitalism, the rule of law, democracy, human rights, all of that is good for the economy and good for your people. And so the New York Times doesn't want that. They want this kumbaya moment. And what I always say is the opposite of America First is consensus with the Europeans or the world.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a big issue out there that's not getting the attention it deserves, in my humble opinion. That is a story out of the Wall Street Journal on the news side that Joe Biden is pressuring, and Blinken, the UK and France and other European allies not to rebuke Iran, not to censure Iran for its breakneck speed in breaking out with a nuclear weapon. Now, what kind of a president does that? And they also say in there, he doesn't want all this coming to the fore before the election. I mean, that is unbelievable, considering what Trump was impeached for with Ukraine, for crying out loud.
Yeah, look, we need to be really trumpeting this article and this strategy from the White House. Because really, from my standpoint, Mark, this is an indication that Joe Biden and Jake Sullivan and Anthony Blinken have not learned their lesson. They are still trying to engage Iran. They still believe that Iran can be brought into the international community. They want to trust Iran. They've given Iran billions of dollars. They've turned around and funded terrorists. And now they're telling the Europeans, let's not critique Iran. It's like they're afraid that if you put pressure on Iran, they're going to lash out at you. And so they're trying to bribe Iran. They're trying to walk around with kid gloves. But let me just tell you, when we had pressure on the Europeans and others, all of our allies, to not do business with Iran, to squeeze Iran, that was the right strategy. We had a lot of Europeans at the time complaining about that. I made it a top priority of mine in Germany to bring in all 50 top companies that were German companies. And I made clear to them, I said, look, the U.S. policy is no business with Iran. And so you have a choice. I'm not telling you you can't do business with Iran, but I am telling you that you don't get to do business with Iran and America. So you should choose. And every single CEO, before they walked out of my office, said, oh, no, we're with America. And I said, great, we'll follow up and make sure that you are not spending one penny inside Iran, because otherwise you're feeding a regime that systematically denies people their human rights.
But, it's a big story. It's in the Wall Street Journal. It's over the weekend, unfortunately. I guess it was yesterday. I'm not hearing a lot about this or seeing a lot about it. Are you? I mean, this is a big damn deal.
This is a very big deal because it is yet another indication of a disastrous, weak policy from Jake Sullivan. And by the way, I do believe that Jake Sullivan is the one that's running our foreign policy, except for Michigan. The political people who watch over Michigan, they're the ones who are doing the Middle East policy. But besides that, we literally have an academic at the NSC who writes white papers and is completely devoid of the reality on the ground. And he is literally now pressuring our allies to back off from Iran at a time when we should be pressuring Iran to not pursue a nuclear weapon, to not be spending money on terrorism. I don't believe that the regime is a regime that you can talk to and have a rational discussion and reach a rational decision. I believe this is an evil regime that must be squeezed and made into a pariah state, not one that needs to be enticed and walking around like we're nervous as to what they're going to do.
We're talking to Rick Grenell. Rick, I'd like to hold you over the break. I want to pursue this and some other issues with you, if you don't mind. We'll be right back.
Mark Levin, the thunder on the right. Call in now, 877-381-3811.
We're here with our friend Rick Grenell, who apparently is very unwelcome among the radical left media. It's not just the New York Times, though, is it, Rick? I mean, they're all out to kill Trump and everybody around him and anybody who might be around him. It's pretty bad, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the Washington, D.C. media. And I think what we're seeing, you've seen places like the Daily Beast now imploding. They're starting to lay people off. It's not surprising to the rest of us that nobody wants to have one-sided media. They want to have real news and fair coverage. And, the New York Times and the Washington Post, I think, have completely ruined their credibility. I don't know any Republicans, any conservatives that take what they say as truth. There's always it was in the New York Times, so I better check and see if it's factual.
And the New York Times history, supporting Stalin with Walter Duranty, covering up the Holocaust for all those years, been several books written on that, helping to install Castro in Cuba. How is it that the New York Times has any reputation other than a horrible one?
Well, I think they've done it to themselves. When you look at their reporters, they're truly activists. I think they're really comfortable with it. I think that's their business model. I think they're very comfortable with just repeating all of the Democratic opposition. If you look, Mark, at what they've done to senators, for instance, all of our candidates in different states, they have attacked using the Democratic opposition book, and they turn it into a New York Times piece. Now that's, totally coordinating with the Democratic National Committee. They're very comfortable doing that. They think, people are going to continue buying their newspaper simply to hear what the Democratic talking points are. But I think outside of Washington, D.C., people are looking for real news. They want a real debate. They want dissenting information. They want both sides of the story, and they just don't get it from the Washington media.
Mm-hmm. I think the reputation of the media is negative, but I think there's such a gap between what the people think and care about and what they think and care about. It really doesn't matter. Most of them are funded by these massive global corporations, you know?
Well, that's it. They've become a business. I mean, you just look at NBC News and MSNBC. They're owned by Comcast. And, you know, Comcast is telling conservatives and Republicans and the general population, come get your cable from us, buy some sort of a digital package. But what you're doing when you do that is you're feeding MSNBC, you're feeding the NBC News. And these are outlets that are incredibly comfortable being one-sided.
You were talking last time we had you here about Anthony Blinken and his connection, his family's connections to Soros. This guy really seems to me like he's way out in left field. He's very strange. He has no common sense. He keeps banging his head against the ideological wall. And but his parents and so forth, there are connections, right?
Yeah, his parents have funded the Don and Vera Blinken Center through the George Soros Foundation. And it's a data center. It's, you know, millions, tens of millions of dollars. And so the connection between George Soros and his work and Anthony Blinken and his work is really seamless. There's a lot of people that go back and forth between the two organizations. And so Anthony Blinken, I think, is taken ideas from George Soros and implemented them at the State Department, which I find to be, you know, I'm very uncomfortable with the way that they've weaponized visas, for instance. They're telling people you can't come into the United States if, you know, you've undermined democracy somehow. And when you look at the details, undermining democracy just means you're against progressive policies. And so we have watched the State Department become completely weaponized under this administration. Not a lot of attention has been given to it because I think most of our media are completely consumed with Trump and the MAGA movement and trying to take them down. But remember, too, Mark, you have Anthony Blinken, who was the point person 3 weeks before the election in 2020. He was the guy that was calling around and getting 51 intelligence officers to sign a letter saying, don't look at Hunter's laptop. That is Russian disinformation. That has never really been fully vetted. I know that Jim Jordan in the House is looking at that situation. They're trying to get to the bottom of it because they want to know, how did that happen? I actually believe that those 51 intelligence officers should absolutely lose their security clearance. They manipulated election or tried to manipulate election. Some would say that they were successful. If 3 weeks before the presidential election in 2020, we didn't have these lofty intelligence officers saying it's Russian disinformation, don't look at the laptop. If we didn't have that, I do think that there would have been a lot more scrutiny under the Biden dealings, the Biden business dealings. But instead, they just kicked the can down the road by really getting these intelligence officers to risk their reputation for politics. And 51 of them were all too willing to do it.
And yet, his appearances before Congress are rare. I mean, he appeared last week, once in the Senate, once in the House. And then he's off to some other country trying to undermine it or back it or do whatever he does and so forth and so on. Do you know him personally?
I don't know him personally, but I do know a lot of the people, the career people at the State Department that are working there. And by the way, I'm somebody who believes that there are a lot of career people at the State Department who will just salute whoever is president and implement the policies. Now, there's some bad apples on both sides that have got to be cleared out. But there's plenty of people at the State Department that want to implement the president's vision. And so, they're frustrated, I think, with Anthony Blinken, because here's a guy who, hasn't come up with a peace plan for Ukraine. He's been the Secretary of State as we've launched into multiple wars. There's no demand that we have peace. And Mark, peace deals, peace agreements, those are the most difficult things to do. If you want to have a successful diplomatic strategy where we don't resort to war and we have hard-fought agreements, you got to have some diplomats who are very tough. You can't have these diplomats who want to do culinary diplomacy, which is what Anthony Blinken has been highlighting, or the art program, and having some of these soft power issues as the priority issue. You just can't do that. I still don't understand why, after more than 2.5 years, Joe Biden hasn't spoken Vladimir Putin. We're spending billions of dollars. They're not even speaking. So where is the peace deal? And by the way, no one is suggesting that a Minsk, or a Minsk II agreement, or the future of whatever we're going to call it, is an easy thing to negotiate. You have to have territorial integrity for Ukraine. And I think you've got to have conversations with the Russians to understand exactly what's at stake here. But you're not going to get it done through culinary diplomacy. You've got to actually pick up the phone. You've got to talk to Putin. You've got to have a strategy where frontline diplomats who are tough as nails are negotiating and using every tool that the United States has. We have sanctions tool. We have the moral high ground tool. There's a whole bunch of different things that we can use and that we should be shifting to be able to reach our goals. But it starts with a phone call.
And yet on the other part of the globe, in the Middle East, they keep trying to pressure Netanyahu, and the Israelis do not want now a Palestinian state. They keep threatening them. They're using Saudi Arabia, the deal that the Israelis and Saudi Arabia are going to cut under the Trump administration. They threw a wrench into that, talking about the Palestinians. They act like they control Israel, like they attack the leadership, the elected leadership in Israel, more than they attack their Iranian friends and so forth and so on. What is that all about, trying to pressure them into something they're not going to do?
Yeah, look, the way I view this is it's really about sequencing. You've got to get the sequencing right. You can't start putting a pier in a raft on the beach to bring in humanitarian aid when we still have hostages and Hamas is still in charge. You have to be able to get the hostages returned. By the way, many people say that most of the hostages are dead, or if not all of them. And so I still believe that we got to get the hostages home, get their bodies home if that's the case. But that is the focus. You've got to pressure Hamas. And then after that, we're never going to be able to deal with the Hamas government. That leadership, all of them, need to be crushed. And we need to have the Arabs helping us do that. And through my conversations, the Arabs want to help us do that. But they need U.S. leadership. There's only one country that can call the meeting, that can get everybody in the room, and that can tell people to behave and focus on the goal. And that is the United States of America. I worked at the UN for 8 years. There's not a single thing around the world that gets done without U.S. leadership. And we don't have that with Anthony Blinken. He's not able to walk into a room and have the participants all be in the room and use the bully pulpit to say, everybody is going to do something. We are not leaving this room until we get the hostages back. I really believe that we have lingered for so long. Many hostages were killed because we didn't have U.S. leadership. Many more lives, more Palestinian lives, have been killed and decimated simply because there's not enough pressure on the international community to go in together and get the hostages returned. This should be something that the Saudis do, the Turks do, the Emiratis do. Bring in the Qataris. But they're not going to play their part if the U.S. isn't able to be there. Think about this, we've got Anthony Blinken and Joe Biden trying to wrestle these people into a room. That's a disaster. Everybody looks at those two and says, this is weakness personified.
Well, Rick Grenell, if I'm asked, I doubt I will be, you should be the next Secretary of State. You'd be fantastic. And if they won't confirm you, you get a recess appointment. You can hang in there for a few years regardless. I think it's going to be political hand-to-hand combat because I do not think the Democrats will accept anything but a let me just say this. I think every single person that Donald Trump nominates will get through because the Senate will be controlled by the Republicans. That would be great. But there is that little problem with a filibuster, But anyway, Rick Grenell, I want to thank you for all you do. The New York Times, just remember, they were for Stalin, they covered up Hitler, and they installed Castro. So you're on the good guy's side, they're on the evil side. You take care of yourself, brother.
Thanks, my friend.
All right, God bless. He is the best. He's fantastic. We've gotten to know him. Just a good guy. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
It's going to go back to Aretha, but we don't have enough time. Ladies and gentlemen, we didn't get to half of what I wanted to get to, but it's very important what we did talk about, and Rick Grenell as well. We salute our armed forces, police officers, firefighters, emergency personnel, our truckers, our brothers and sisters in Ukraine, our brothers and sisters in Israel. We have your back, even though Biden doesn't. And, of course, you, red-blooded Americans. God bless each and every one of you. I'll see you tomorrow.